All right, today we're going to talk about a guy who didn't just play the stock market, he practically rewrote the rules. We're diving into a story of insane ambition, crazy charisma, and a financial system that was pushed right to its absolute breaking point. Let's get into it.
Yeah, that quote right there, it says it all. We're not just talking about influencing a stock here or there. No, this was about bending the very fabric of India's financial world to his own will. It's just staggering. And I really need you to let this sink in. This isn't some movie script. The numbers, the crash, the lives that were ruined, it was all very, very real. This story literally shook an entire nation's economy right to its foundations.
So, how in the world does someone from a pretty modest background end up becoming the undisputed king of the stock market? Well, let's trace the incredible, almost unbelievable rise of the man they would come to call the Big Bull.
You know, Harshad Mehta's story doesn't start on some fancy trading floor. He came from a small town, no connections, nothing. But he moves to Mumbai, the financial heart of India, with this one single obsession: figure out how money works and then make it work for him. He really did start from the bottom, climbing his way up until he became a licensed stockbroker.
And you have to understand, the power of this idea was just immense. I mean, this wasn't just some trading strategy, it was a gospel. Mehta was selling pure, uncut confidence. He convinced this entire rising middle class that the market only went one direction, up. And man, did they believe him.
And that belief, well, that's how he got his legendary nickname. See, a bull market is a rising market, and people saw Harshad Mehta as the one-man engine making it all happen. Wherever he put his money, others would follow. And that created this powerful, self-fulfilling prophecy. And listen, his impact was absolutely undeniable. Just take a look at the cement company ACC. Once Mehta set his sights on it, its stock price exploded by over 400%. That's not just a good return, that's a phenomenon. To the public, he was a rock star, a genius. But behind the curtain, a very different story was playing.
But here's the thing, that spectacular rise wasn't just fueled by genius. Nope, it was fueled by a secret, a massive loophole hidden deep inside the plumbing of the banking system.
Okay, to really get how this all worked, you just need to know about one kind of boring financial tool, the bank receipt. Seriously, think of it like a pinky swear between banks. One bank gives another a BR, and that's a promise to deliver government bonds later in exchange for cash right now. The key part here, the most crucial part, they were supposed to be backed by real assets.
So how did he turn this little piece of paper into a weapon? It's kind of brilliant in a terrifying way. First, Mehta got his hands on bank receipts that were either totally fake or backed by, you guessed it, absolutely nothing. Then, he used these worthless pieces of paper as collateral to borrow insane amounts of cash from the banking system. And all that cash, it went straight into the stock market, creating the very boom that made him a living legend.
And that, right there, that's the heart of the deception. Everyone, from the smallest investor putting in their savings to the biggest newspapers, they saw this rising market and thought, wow, this is it. This is the new booming India. But it was all just a house of cards, built on a foundation of a legally siphoned bank money.
Well, you know a mirage like that can't last forever, right? And in 1992, that massive house of cards started to wobble. And when it finally came crashing down, it set off one of the biggest financial crises in India's modern history.
The person who pulled on that first thread, the one that unraveled everything, was an investigative journalist named Sucheta Dalal. She started asking the one simple question that apparently no one else thought to ask: where is all of this money actually coming from? She exposed the fake bank receipt scheme, and the second that truth hit the newspapers, the whole illusion just shattered.
And the price tag for that shattered illusion? The equivalent of about $5 billion in today's money. Just gone. Vanished into thin air.
The fallout, it was catastrophic. The stock market went into an absolute freefall. Banks suddenly woke up and realized the collateral they were holding was completely worthless, which sparked this massive credit crisis. But the real tragedy was the thousands and thousands of everyday investors who bet their entire life savings on the big bull, only to lose every last penny. The whole thing exposed these huge cracks in the system. The regulators just had no idea what was going on.
So what are we supposed to take away from all this? The story of Harshad Mehta is way more than just a financial thriller. It's really a timeless cautionary tale, about markets, about mob mentality, and about what happens when greed just completely outruns the rules. As for Mehta himself, yep, He was arrested and was facing dozens of charges. But right to the very end, he claimed he was innocent. He argued he was just a scapegoat, that he was simply playing a game where the rules were already bent by a corrupt system. He ended up dying in custody back in 2001, leaving most of the cases against him and a lot of questions forever unresolved.
But his legacy? It actually forced a complete top-to-bottom overhaul of India's financial regulations. In fact, this whole scam was the direct catalyst for creating a modern, computerized stock exchange and giving real teeth to SEBI, which is kind of like India's version of the SEC. It's a universal lesson, right? When a system rewards shortcuts, it's just inviting a crash. Sustainable growth can only be built on discipline and trust. And in the end, this whole story is just a huge reminder that the psychology of greed, that temptation of easy money, it never really goes away. Which kind of leaves us with one final nagging question. Have we actually learned anything at all?